What if the life you were meant to live was stolen from you before you were even born? What if a single act of honesty could unlock a truth buried for decades? A truth so powerful it could rewrite your entire existence. For one waitress, struggling to keep her head above water, returning a lost watch was not just a good deed. It was the key to a locked legacy and a confrontation with a past she never knew she had. This is a story about a simple engraving, a secret love, and a test of character so profound it could either shatter a young woman's spirit or transform her into the person she was always destined to be. Alara traced the rim of a coffee cup with a damp cloth, the motion automatic, her mind 1,000 miles away. The diner hummed with the quiet clatter of late-night patrons, but all she could hear was the ticking clock of her grandmother's mounting medical bills. Each new prescription, each specialist visit, was another weight added to her already stooped shoulders. She was 24, but some days she felt ancient, worn down by a life of just scraping by. Her smile, a genuine and warm thing she offered freely to every customer, was the only currency she had in abundance. That night, a man sat alone in her section, a ghost in $1,000 suit. He didn't look at the menu, just ordered a black coffee and stared out the window at the rain-slicked street. There was an aura of profound loneliness around him, a stillness that felt heavier than the city's gloom. When he left, leaving a $100 bill for a $2 coffee, Alara noticed something else on the worn vinyl of the booth seat. A watch. It wasn't just a watch. It was a masterpiece of gold and leather, its weight substantial in her palm. It felt heavier than her rent, heavier than a month's worth of her grandmother's medicine. For a fleeting, desperate moment, she saw not a watch, but a solution, an escape. But the thought soured as quickly as it came. It wasn't her escape to take. Her grandmother had raised her with one unwavering principle: your character is the one thing you truly own. Selling it was a price too high for any comfort. The next day, Alara's day off, was spent not resting but on a mission. A quick search online for the watch's brand led her to a world of obscene luxury she couldn't comprehend. Another search for men who might frequent a greasy spoon diner while wearing such a timepiece was fruitless. But she remembered the car he'd stepped into, a sleek black sedan with a discreet but distinct logo on the side, a stylized V. That was her only clue. It led her, after 2 bus transfers and a long walk through the city's financial district, to a skyscraper that pierced the clouds. Vance Consolidated. The name was etched in cold, silver letters above the glass doors. Taking a deep breath, she walked into a lobby so vast and silent it felt like a cathedral dedicated to commerce. The air was chilled, smelling of money and ambition. The receptionist, a woman with a perfectly sculpted expression of polite disdain, looked at Alara's worn coat and sensible shoes as if they were a personal offense. "I'm here to see Mr. Vance," Alara said, her voice small in the cavernous space. "I believe he lost something." The receptionist's eyebrow arched. "Mr. Vance doesn't see anyone without an appointment." "Please," Alara insisted, holding up the watch. "It's important. It's his." The sight of the watch shifted the woman's composure. A series of hushed phone calls followed, and to Alara's utter astonishment, she was ushered into a private elevator that ascended in unnerving silence. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office. The city sprawled out below them, a toy set for the giants who worked in towers like this. And there, standing by the window, was the man from the diner, Alistair Vance. He turned, his eyes just as somber in the daylight as they had been in the diner's dim glow. "You found my watch, it wasn't a question." "You left it," Alara said simply, holding it out. He walked towards her and took it, his fingers brushing hers. The brief contact was like a spark of static electricity. He studied her face, his gaze intense, searching. "The pawn shop is 2 blocks from that diner. They would have given you enough to disappear for a year." "It wasn't mine to sell," she replied, her chin held high. He was silent for a long moment. He looked from her face to the watch and then back again. A flicker of some unreadable emotion crossed his features. "I appreciate your honesty. Most people are not so principled. Name your reward." Alara shook her head. I don't want a reward. I just wanted to do the right thing. Everyone has a price, he stated, his voice flat, a cynical edge to it. What's yours? The question stung. My grandmother is sick. The bills are a lot. But my integrity isn't for sale. Alistair Vance's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He seemed to look right through her, seeing the exhaustion she tried so hard to hide. I have a proposition for you, he said, his tone shifting. It's not a reward. It's a job. I need someone trustworthy to help with a personal matter. A research project of sorts. It would require complete discretion. He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. And it pays far more than you make serving coffee. Alara was stunned into silence. A job? Here? It made no sense. I'm a waitress. I don't have any experience in whatever this is. I'm not hiring your experience, Alistair said, his voice low and serious. I'm hiring your character. The job is simple. I need you to organize my family's private archives. I'm looking for something. For someone. He turned and picked up a small, silver-framed photograph from his desk. He handed it to her. It was a faded picture of a young woman with a radiant smile and eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief. Alara felt a strange, inexplicable pang of recognition, a ghost of a memory that she couldn't quite grasp. Her name was Lily, Alistair said, his voice thick with a sorrow that spanned decades. Help me find out what happened to her. The archives were housed in a wing of Alistair's penthouse, a library of ghosts filled with leather-bound ledgers, dusty boxes of correspondence, and forgotten photo albums. Alara's new life was a study in contrasts. By day, she sat in a silent, climate-controlled room, the scent of old paper and leather replacing the familiar smell of grease and coffee. By night, she returned to her tiny apartment, the weight of her grandmother's illness a constant, pressing reality. Alistair was a remote employer. He would appear once a day, stand silently in the doorway for a few moments, his eyes scanning the room as if he expected Lily herself to materialize from the stacks of paper, and then leave without a word. Alara's task was to catalog everything. She started with the letters, sorting them by date and author. She learned the history of the Vance family through their own words. Tales of corporate takeovers, society galas, and bitter sibling rivalries. One name appeared frequently in the early years: Robert Vance, Alistair's younger, more ambitious brother. His letters were filled with a sharp, almost cruel wit, and a clear jealousy of his older brother's standing. Days turned into a week. Alara developed a system, her methodical work a welcome distraction from her worries. The generous salary Alistair was paying her had already eased the immediate financial pressure, allowing her to schedule a consultation with a top specialist for her grandmother. A fragile seed of hope had begun to sprout within her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The feeling solidified into a person one afternoon. A man in a suit so sharp it looked like it could cut glass entered the library without knocking. He had Alistair's strong jawline but none of his quiet melancholy. His eyes were cold, assessing, and they swept over Alara with open contempt. "So you're the charity case," he said, his voice a smooth, condescending drawl. Alara stood up, startled. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Marcus Thorne. Alistair is my uncle," he announced, as if the name itself were a weapon. "And I'm the one who usually manages his personal affairs. I have to say, I'm surprised he outsourced this to a waitress." He walked around her desk, picking up a stack of letters she had just organized. "What, exactly, do you think you're going to find in all this old junk?" "Your uncle hired me to do a job," Alara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm just trying to do it." "My uncle is a sentimental old man," Marcus sneered. "He gets lost in the past. It's my job to protect him from people who might try to take advantage of that." The implication was clear. He saw her as a threat, a gold digger who had somehow managed to worm her way into his uncle's confidence. "I'm not taking advantage of anyone," she retorted, her cheeks flushing with anger. "I returned his watch. He offered me a job. That's all." Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. Right? A lost watch. A story so pure it belongs in a fairy tale. Let me give you some advice. Do your little organizing project, take the money, and disappear. The Vance family has its secrets, and trust me, you don't want to be the one digging them up. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Some things are better left buried. For everyone's sake. His visit left a chill in the air. His hostility was a stark warning, confirming that her work was more than just a nostalgic project for an old man. There was something in these archives that Marcus Thorne desperately wanted to remain hidden. His threat didn't scare her off. It ignited her resolve. Now, she wasn't just working for a paycheck. She was searching for a truth that someone powerful was trying to suppress. The search became more focused. Alara started paying closer attention to the correspondence from the period when the photograph of Lily was taken, some 30 years prior. Marcus's words echoed in her mind. Some things are better left buried. He had seemed particularly dismissive of a set of boxes in the corner, labeled Decommissioned Accounts, R. Vance. He had told her not to bother with them, that they were just my father's boring old business receipts, utterly irrelevant. His insistence was suspicious. One evening, after Marcus had made another one of his unnerving check-in visits, Alara found herself drawn to those specific boxes. She lifted the heavy lid on the first one. It was exactly as he'd said. Endless stacks of receipts, ledgers, and dry financial reports from his father, Robert. She spent an hour sifting through the brittle paper, a feeling of disappointment growing. Maybe he was telling the truth. As she reached the bottom of the box, her fingers brushed against something that wasn't paper. A false bottom. Her heart hammered against her ribs. With trembling hands, she pried it open. Inside lay a small, oilskin-wrapped parcel. It was tied with a faded blue ribbon. She carefully untied the knot and unfolded the cloth. There, perfectly preserved, was a bundle of letters. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. The salutation on the first one made her breath catch in her throat. My dearest Alistair. They were from Lily. She sat on the floor of the silent library and read. The first few letters were filled with the breathless joy of a new and secret love. Lily wrote about their clandestine meetings, her dreams for their future, her deep and unwavering affection for Alistair. Her words painted a portrait of a man Alara had never seen. One who was warm, passionate, and full of life. But as she read on, the tone began to shift. A shadow fell over the pages. Your brother, Robert, spoke to me today, one letter read. He said you were having second thoughts, that your family would never approve of me. He said you asked him to give me this money to go away. Alistair, my love, I don't believe him. Please write to me. Tell me this is a lie. The next letter was more desperate. It has been 2 weeks. Robert says you refuse to see me. He watches me, Alistair. I feel like a prisoner. I know in my heart you wouldn't do this to us. Then came the final letter. The paper was tear-stained, the ink slightly blurred. My love, I have to go. Robert has made it clear I am no longer safe here. He has threatened things I cannot bear to write. But you must know, I will never stop loving you. And I will never be alone, because I carry a part of you with me now. Precious secret. I will raise our child knowing the goodness of their father, even if they never get to meet him. I will tell them about your kindness, your strength. I will love you forever. Yours, Lily. Alara stared at the last line, the words swimming before her eyes. Our child. Alistair had a child he never knew about. Robert Vance had not only lied and separated 2 people in love, he had stolen a family. He had buried the truth to protect his own ambitions, and his son, Marcus, was now standing guard over that same grave. A cold, hard certainty settled in Alara's stomach. This was the secret Marcus was so desperate to protect. This was the truth that could change everything. The weight of the letters felt immense, a lifetime of secrets in her hands. The next morning, as Alara prepared to confront Alistair with her discovery, Marcus intercepted her in the hallway outside the archives. His smile was predatory. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said. his eyes flicking to the file folder she clutched to her chest. "Find anything interesting in my father's old papers?" "You knew," Elara said, her voice barely a whisper. "You knew those letters were there." His smile vanished. "I knew my father was thorough. He cleaned up my uncle's messes. That girl, Lily, she was a distraction. A nobody. My father did what was necessary to protect the Vance name and this company. He destroyed their lives." Elara shot back, her voice ringing with indignation. "He lied to both of them, and you've been continuing that lie." Marcus took a step closer, his demeanor changing. The aggression was gone, replaced by a practiced, almost sympathetic tone. "Look, Elara, you're a smart girl. You come from nothing. You know what a struggle life can be. What good does it do to bring all this up now? It will only cause my uncle pain. It's ancient history." He pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket and a pen. "But I can see you're a person of conviction. So let me make this right," he scribbled furiously, then tore out the check and held it out to her. $500,000. Enough to get your grandmother the best care in the world. Enough for you to start a new life, anywhere you want. All you have to do is give me those letters and walk away. Forget you ever saw them. Consider it a bonus for a job well done." Elara stared at the check. The number had so many zeros it seemed unreal. It was the answer to every prayer, the end of every sleepless night. It was freedom. It was her grandmother's health. It was everything she had ever wanted. All she had to do was sell a truth that didn't belong to her. She looked from the check to Marcus's expectant, smug face. He saw her as just another problem money could solve. He believed, just as Alistair once had, that everyone had a price. And in that moment, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Your character is the one thing you truly own." Slowly, deliberately, she shook her head. "No." Marcus's face tightened. "Don't be a fool. This is a once-in-a-lifetime offer. My grandmother's life is not for sale," she said, her voice gaining strength. "And neither is Alistair's past. He deserves to know the truth." She pushed past him, leaving him standing in the hallway, the check still extended in his hand like a worthless piece of paper. Elara found Alistair in his office, staring out at the city just as he had been the first day she met him. She placed the letters gently on his desk. "I think you need to read these," she said softly. He looked at the familiar handwriting and a pained expression crossed his face. "I thought I'd burned all of her things." "These weren't with your things," Elara explained. "They were hidden in your brother's files." He picked up the first letter, his hand shaking slightly. As he read, his carefully constructed walls of stoicism began to crumble, brick by brick. Decades of icy reserve melted away, revealing the raw grief he had carried for 30 years. He read of Lily's love, her confusion, her desperation. He saw his brother's treachery laid bare on the page. When he got to the final letter, a choked sob escaped his lips. He sank into his chair, the page trembling in his grasp. "A child," he whispered, the words ragged. "She was carrying my child." He looked up at Elara, his eyes filled with a storm of emotions. Anguish, regret, and a dawning, impossible question. "My brother told me she ran off with another man. He showed me a letter, a forgery it must have been. He said she took money and left without a word." He shook his head, the betrayal of it all washing over him. "All these years, I believed I was abandoned. I let my heart turn to stone because of a lie." He stood up and walked over to a small safe hidden behind a painting. He pulled out the watch she had returned to him. "She gave this to me on our 6-month anniversary," he said, his voice thick. He pressed a tiny, hidden clasp on the side. The back of the watch popped open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a tiny, intricate engraving was visible. He handed it to her. Elara read the words etched in the gold. "To my North Star. Forever yours, Lily." It was a line from one of the letters. "Her name was Lily Peterson," Alistair said, watching her face intently. "She never spoke much of her family, only that she was an orphan, raised by her grandmother." He paused, his gaze piercing. What was your mother's name, Alara? Alara's heart stopped. Sarah, she breathed. Her name was Sarah Peterson. My grandmother. She raised my mother. And then she raised me after my mother passed away. Alistair's eyes filled with tears. He reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb tracing the line of her knuckles. He saw it then. The same fire in her eyes, the same determined set of her jaw. It was Lily, looking back at him across the chasm of 30 years. Sarah, he repeated the name as if it were a sacred prayer. Lily's letters. She said she would tell our child about me. He looked at Alara, a lifetime of questions in his eyes. Did she? Tears streamed down Alara's face as a lifetime of fragmented pieces clicked into place. Her mother's stories of a wonderful, kind man she'd never met. The faded photograph of a smiling young woman her grandmother kept by her bed. The inexplicable sense of familiarity she'd felt looking at that same photo on Alistair's desk. My mother died when I was young, Alara whispered. But she always told me my father was a good man who was forced away by circumstances he couldn't control. She never knew his name, only that he was her mother's North Star. The last piece of the puzzle slotted into place. The truth, bright and painful and beautiful, was finally revealed. Alistair Vance wasn't just her employer. He was her grandfather. The air in the boardroom was thick with tension. Alistair sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, a position of power he had not fully inhabited for years. But today, the quiet, melancholic billionaire was gone. In his place was a patriarch, a titan of industry, his eyes burning with a cold fire Alara had not seen before. She sat to his right, no longer an employee, but a silent testament to the truth. Across from them sat Marcus Thorne, his face a mask of arrogant defiance, though a faint tremor in his hand betrayed his nerves. "Thank you for coming, Marcus," Alistair began, his voice dangerously calm. "I've called this meeting to discuss the future of the Vance family legacy." Marcus scoffed. "The legacy is secure, uncle. I've made sure of that." He shot a venomous glare at Alara. Despite recent distractions, Alistair ignored the jibe. He slid the bundle of Lily's letters across the polished table. They stopped directly in front of Marcus. "My legacy isn't just about stock prices and acquisitions, Marcus. It's about truth. It's about family. Two things your father, and now you, have worked very hard to corrupt." Marcus's face paled as he looked at the letters. "That's ancient history. Sentimental nonsense. What does it matter now?" "It matters," Alistair's voice boomed, startling them all. "Because that sentimental nonsense cost me a daughter, cost me a granddaughter." He gestured to Alara. "Your father, Robert, built his career on a foundation of lies. He told me the love of my life abandoned me. He stole my child from me to ensure his own place in this company. And you knew. You found these letters, and you kept the lie going to protect your inheritance." Cornered and exposed, Marcus's arrogance curdled into rage. "He did what he had to do, and so did I. Lily was nobody, and she," he spat, pointing a trembling finger at Alara, "is a diner waitress. You think she can be a part of this family? This world? You've gone soft, old man. Dad was right about you. You were always weak." The confession, spat out in a torrent of arrogance and entitlement, hung in the air. It was all the confirmation Alistair needed. "You are right about one thing," Alistair said, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. "The weak have no place here." He pressed a button on his intercom. "Security, please escort Mr. Thorne from the premises. His access has been revoked. He is no longer an employee of this company, nor is he a beneficiary of my estate." Marcus stared, his jaw slack with disbelief. "You can't do this. I am your heir." "No," Alistair said, his gaze unwavering as security guards entered the room. "My heir is sitting right beside me." The guards took Marcus by the arms. His face contorted with fury as he was pulled from the room, his threats and curses echoing down the hall until they were cut off by the closing of the doors. The silence he left behind was profound. The long-buried injustice had finally been brought to light, and justice, swift and absolute, had been served. Alistair reached across the table and placed his hand over Alara's. For the first time, they were not a billionaire and a waitress, but grandfather and granddaughter, their new reality solidifying in the quiet aftermath of the storm. Weeks later, the sterile scent of the corporate boardroom was replaced by the clean, hopeful smell of a sunlit hospital room. Alara's grandmother, propped up on plush pillows in a state-of-the-art medical facility, looked healthier than she had in years. The worry lines on her face had softened, replaced by a gentle, peaceful smile. Alistair sat on the other side of the bed, listening intently as she recounted a story about Alara's childhood. He was no longer a ghost in a suit, but a man slowly, carefully, learning the shape of the family that had been stolen from him. Alara watched them, a quiet joy filling her heart. The watch, now a treasured heirloom, rested on her wrist. It was a reminder that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in integrity, love, and the courage to do the right thing. A single act of honesty had not just returned a lost object, it had returned a lost legacy. How often do we underestimate the power of our own character? In a world that so often rewards cynicism, perhaps the greatest strength lies in simple, unwavering integrity, for it is a key that can unlock doors we never even knew were closed.